Welcome to the lecture for Chapter 4, From Writing Logically, Thinking Critically. In this chapter, we're going to explore the elements of a written argument. In order for your written argument to be successful, you need to know how to narrow the topic of your argument from an issue to a question at issue to a thesis. You need to know how to shape your written argument with an introduction, support for your thesis, and a conclusion. You need to know how to use rhetorical strategies of refutation, concession, and Rogerian strategy, and you need to know how to make your writing cohesive and logical through the use of joining words. The first critical step is to focus and refine the topic. Sometimes authors think they are presenting an argument, but they are simply offering a one-sided, unfocused rant because they fail to focus on a single question at issue. The question at issue is very important because a topic can have many questions related to it, but you need to pick only one. In order to have a compelling argument, you must choose an issue that is a topic of concern or controversy. For example, pet care is a topic, but not an issue. It has no argumentative edge. No one would logically argue against appropriate pet care. However, laboratory testing of animals is an issue, with plenty of support on both sides. Once you choose your topic, you need to choose the question at issue. This is the example from your book on global warming. You have to select the particular aspect of the issue under consideration. Global warming is an issue that contains many questions at issue. For example, does global warming exist? Should the EPA declare global warming a threat to human health? And so on. Once you've chosen the question, then you can start thinking about your thesis. A quick word of caution. A writer who does not focus on one and only one question at issue risks producing a disorganized essay, one that is difficult to follow because the readers will not be sure they understand the point. Your task as a writer is to isolate a particular question at issue and stay focused on it. Think of yourself as a pit bull latched right onto that question at issue so that you can fully explore it. Once you have chosen your topic of concern and the question at issue in that topic of concern or controversy, now it's time to move on to the thesis. The issue and the question are the focus of your essay, but they are neutral statements. The thesis, however, states the writer's position, a response to the question at issue, the conclusion of the actual argument. While at its core it is a single statement, it isn't unusual for a thesis to require a supporting paragraph. A well thought out and clearly expressed thesis guides both the reader and the writer. So as you sit down to begin your essay, you can use your thesis to guide your research. So to quickly summarize what we just covered, you should take the following steps to prepare to write your argument. Select an issue that is controversial. Narrow that issue to a focused question at issue because remember, the issue that you select will have many questions. And then write a thesis that makes an assertion about this question at issue. Your thesis states your opinion on the question at issue. Let's take a look at page 75 and let's do exercise 4A. Please upload this assignment to exercise 4A in Module 4. Let's take a moment to explore the concept of rhetoric. We hear this word bandied around a lot in different news outlets, and people use it as a dismissive way of saying that's just spin. They'll say things like, oh, that's just rhetoric. Actually, according to Aristotle, rhetoric is the art of using language to good effect, to prove, to convince, or to persuade. So, when we talk about rhetoric, we're actually talking about good writing that convinces people to your point of view. We're going to be exploring that a lot, especially as we get closer to our final essay. Let's begin thinking about the construction of your argument. Of course, it's going to begin with an introduction, and you have some options when you decide how you want to begin your argument. You can begin with a relevant narrative, either actual or fictional. You can use an applicable quotation, and that can provide an interesting way into your argument. An opposing view allows you to build your argument on a refutation of what is often the prevailing wisdom on the issue, and then you can dispatch with that as you build your case. Some arguments need an expanded explanation of the topic, especially if it's technical in nature. For example, if you were doing an essay on the negative effects of virtual reality, you would need to define what virtual reality is. Once you finish your introduction, it's time to develop your argument in the body of the essay. So to develop your argument, you need to present and support as many strong premises or reasons in support of your position. The support must contain as many specific details as possible. The confirmation of your position must be directly related to your thesis. Don't wander. Stay on topic. And more is not necessarily better. If the premise is weak, exclude it. Use your strongest premises and exclude the rest, because if you use weak premises, that is what your opponent will latch onto when they try to discredit your position. And it is possible to have a strong argument with only 2 or 3 premises if those premises are convincing and developed in detail. So more isn't necessarily better. Once you have fully supported your position in your argument, it's time to conclude the essay. If the essay is long and complex, summarize where you've been and what you propose. If you have recommendations, you can include them, but don't offer any new premises at this point or any new questions at issue. Remember that your conclusion is the last thing your reader is going to see, so they're going to remember it better than anything else in the essay. The persuasive argument depends on dialectical thinking. Dialectic is the art of arriving at the truth by disclosing the views contrary to your own and overcoming them with superior support. That one mark of a maturing mind is the ability to take another's point of view and thus be capable of considering 2 conflicting views on the same issue. They've done several studies on this, which have confirmed that people will more likely believe news articles which support their already held beliefs. But remember, it's important that we don't cling to cherished beliefs in the face of evidence that contradicts it. Part of the dialectic approach in arguments is to address counter-arguments. So why should you call attention to your opponent's arguments? Well, there are several reasons. 1, by anticipating your opponent's reasoning, you can often disarm the opposition. You can make your own position stronger when you state and then refute the opposing premises by demonstrating their weakness or falseness. But remember, your opponent will be trying to find the same things in your essay, which is why you want to use very strong premises. By addressing counter-arguments to your position, you also appear more reasonable. When you acknowledge the possibility of merit in some of your opponent's reasoning, you establish yourself as a generous thinker, and people are more likely to have an open mind about what you're saying. You may discover weakness or contradiction in your own thinking that you will need to address. I have had students get approved for a topic on an argument, and then halfway through the project they have to change their focus because they realize that what they originally thought was their position could not be proven with the evidence that was out there. So how much counter-argument should you use? Well, if your premises are stronger than your counter-arguments, use fewer counter-arguments and focus on your own premises. There are a few strategies that you can use when you need to address a counter-argument. Refutation means you present the counter-argument and then explain why this position is false, misleading, or irrelevant. Discredit it in some well-reasoned way. That's important, well-reasoned way. Concession. Recognize the merit of a counter-argument, and so concede that point and move on. Do it as quickly as possible. Do it sooner rather than later in your essay. And then there's Rogerian strategy. This is where you develop empathy, to see the expressed idea and attitude from the other person's point of view. And sometimes there's just no other side worth defending. In order for your reader to understand your position and how the support is constructed, you need to establish a logical sequence of thought in your written argument from sentence to sentence and from paragraph to paragraph. Joining words can help establish this logical sequence between ideas. Take a look at this table, which is from your book. It shows you how to use each one of the joining words in a way to help with transitions. So if you're doing counter-argument refutation, you can use but and yet. If you have major transitions and you're doing counter-argument refutations, you can say things like however and on the other hand. And if you're conceding a point, you can just say whereas or although and so on. Let's take a look at a final checklist for the written argument. Remember, you need to choose an issue worth arguing, one that has a compelling edge. This is that whole pet care versus laboratory testing on animals distinction that we saw earlier in the lecture. Express your thesis clearly and use it to guide your research and to help you stay on topic. Support your own position as thoroughly as possible using the best premises that you have. Discard the ones that are weak. Anticipate relevant opposing views and counterarguments. Provide appropriate concessions and refutations. Develop empathy with your audience. And then use those joining words to create a coherent flow and a logical progression of your ideas. So in wrapping up the lecture, convincing arguments usually contain an introduction to the topic and perhaps more explanation depending on the type of topic you're dealing with, a stated thesis that helps you and the reader know where you're going, well-supported premises that have a lot of detail, acknowledgement of opposing views, and a conclusion. If we follow these steps, we will likely have a very convincing argument.